On any given night in America, more than 771,000 people are homeless. Of that number, over 140,000 are seniors age 55 and older. And by the end of the decade, this number is expected to almost triple. Behind those statistics are stories, sacred stories. These are grandparents who spent decades raising kids and grandkids. There are elders who poured out wisdom, laughter, and love in churches, neighborhoods, and communities. There are veterans who once wore the uniform and carried our flag in the battle, and now they carry their belongings in shopping carts and plastic bags, facing their later years without the safety of a home. You see, these aren't just social statistics, they're theological questions. Because if every person bears the image of God, then what does it say about us when God's image is sleeping under a bridge? Here in Tennessee, this crisis isn't far away. In 2023, more than 9,000 Tennesseans were homeless on any given night. And of that number, at least 759 were age 55 and older. And that's nearly 1 in 10. 1 in 10 of our unhoused neighbors is someone's mother, someone's father, someone's prayer partner who just couldn't keep up with the rising rent, rising medical costs. The stories beyond those numbers will break your heart. In Nashville, some elders leave hospitals with nowhere safe to go. They're discharged with oxygen tanks and wheelchairs and end up in shelters that were never designed for fragile bodies. In Knoxville, senior ministries tell us that they're getting more calls than ever from older adults who never thought they'd face eviction this late in life. And out in rural towns where folks have too much pride to ask for help, some of our neighbors are quietly sleeping in cars or moving from couch to couch, hoping someone will notice. The geography changes, but the pain does not. Our elders are aging into poverty, and poverty is aging into homelessness. That's why the obligation of the church isn't just moral, it's biblical. The psalmist prayed, "Do not cast me off in the time of old age, and do not forsake me when my strength is spent." It's not just a cry for mercy, it's a reminder of covenant relationship. Because God has always had a special concern for those the world forgets. And when our elders are left to wander the streets, it's not only a social failure, it's a spiritual one. Jesus said, "I was a stranger and you welcomed me." And in today's Tennessee, that stranger often has gray hairs or a cane or a lifetime of stories about faith and family and service. So what does it mean for the church to welcome them? I think that it starts with presence. Not programs first, presence. We have to make space for the elderly people, not as projects, but as people. People who still bear the image of God even when their strength is gone. And that might look like opening a fellowship hall as a warming center on cold nights. It might look like volunteers visiting elders in transitional housing. It might simply be sitting across the table from someone who has no family left to check on them. Presence isn't complicated, but it is costly. It costs time, it costs comfort, it costs the willingness to be interrupted. And let me be honest here, that's how Jesus lived his ministry. Always interruptible, always available, always present. We also have to honor those already standing on the front lines, the nurses, the case managers, the shelter staff, the social workers, chaplains. They are doing holy work, whether they would call it that or not. Across our state, ministries like the Village at Glencliff in Nashville or Catholic Charities in Knoxville are already walking this road. They remind us that the gospel isn't just something we preach, it's something we practice. Faith that never leaves the sanctuary, it isn't faith at all. In East Tennessee, I've seen small churches faithfully handing out food and blankets and prayer. They don't have big budgets, but they have big hearts. And that's what God honors. So the question for the rest of us is not whether to join them, it's how do we join them? How can we strengthen their hand? How can we expand their reach? How can we let our witness echo louder than our cry for comfort? Sometimes the answer is financial, sometimes it's relational, and sometimes it's prophetic. Speaking up when systems forget the least of these. Because James chapter 1 tells us that religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress. And if we're writing that verse today, we might want to add in and elders with nowhere to go. But let's not stop at crisis response. Let's talk about prevention. Because the gospel doesn't just heal the wounded, it builds systems of mercy that keep people from being wounded in the first place. Churches can walk with older adults before crisis hits. We can help with groceries when inflation bites. We can offer rides to doctor's appointments. We can fix a porch step before it turns into a hospital visit. We can simply check in and ask how you holding up. We can fight the loneliness that so many elders carry like hidden weight. Because isolation is its own kind of homelessness. You can have a roof over your head and still feel unseen. But in the body of Christ, no one should ever be unseen. But we can build intergenerational friendships, teens, seniors sharing meals, sharing stories, sharing life together. Because that's discipleship. Caring for elders is not a charity, it's discipleship. It's formation. It's following the Jesus who knelt to wash feet, to touch lepers, who took time for those overlooked by everyone else. When we honor the aged, we honor God. When we make room for them, we're making room for Christ himself. And when the church rises to embrace the elders among us, we do more than meet a social need. We're living into the gospel, a gospel that promises God's presence in every season of life, from the cradle to the crane, from the nursery to the nursing home. That's the kingdom breaking in. That's the good news that still changes everything. And maybe, if we're faithful, the day will come when the phrase homeless elder disappears from Tennessee's vocabulary, because the people of God stood up and said, not on our watch. See, not on our watch will the gray-haired sleep on sidewalks. Not on our watch will veterans spend their final years in cars. Not on our watch will grandmothers have to choose between insulin and rent. Because we serve a Christ who said, I go to prepare a place for you. And if Christ has prepared a place for us, then surely we can prepare a place for one another. So that's the call. That's the mission. That's the gospel in motion. So let's rise to it with open hearts and open hands and open doors. Let's make sure our elders are not only remembered, but restored. Because when the church shelters the aged, we show the world what love looks like with skin on. And that's what it means to be the body of Christ.